couple of weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be in New Zealand for Brew NZ, and I visited Doug and Gabby at their farm, Gladfield maltings. Had a wonderful experience. So you're in for a very interesting, great discussion and great talk now. And so I'm going to introduce Michael. Over to you.
Going neutral. Shit, that's hard to say. If you think it's hard to say, you try actually doing it. G'day, I'm Doug, I'm from Gladfield, and I'm going to tell you how we dealt with the C word at Gladfield Malt. Over the last couple of years, we've had countless number of salespeople knocking on our door, trying to tell us and sell us the carbon neutral way. And just as many people trying to sell us expensive equipment and solutions to become carbon neutral. And after a couple of years, I've come to the conclusion that carbon neutral is a utopia. But these salespeople, if we just go back a slide, it reminds me of a story about a church that tried to sell Bibles to raise money. After 12 months, only one person had managed to sell any Bibles, and it was really quite astounding because that one person had a terrible stutter. And nobody could believe that he could sell anything. And the minister said, "Mate, how did you sell those Bibles?" And he said it was simple. I knocked on the door, and I would ask, do you want a Bible? Or would you like me to read it to you? Now that's the reality, isn't it? We're so busy in our own personal space, chasing after our own little hiccups that go on along the way, that when a salesman turns up, sometimes the easiest thing to do is just agree and say, "Yep, mate, how much? Where do I sign?" But as I said before, after 2 years of trying to become carbon neutral, we decided it is a utopia. The problem was, every time we thought we had it nailed down, some guy with a clipboard would come along and shift the goalposts. In fact, that guy with the clipboard was so good at moving those goalposts around on us that half the time we're scoring an own goal without even knowing it. But don't despair. After 2 years of ticking boxes one after the other and not actually achieving anything, we decided to drown our sorrows. Yes, the clipboard guy didn't agree with that, but the good thing about it, it stopped our local brewery going into liquidation. And in 2021, while I was sitting on the harvester, harvesting our crop of barley, thinking about how am I supposed to feed the planet while I'm allegedly screwing the planet, I thought I'd come up with a plan that was going to work. Number one on that plan was get rid of the clipboard guy. Number two, let's go and visit industries that identify as carbon neutral. Bypass the marketing team and go straight to the coalface. Excuse the pun. I want to talk to the people on the ground floor and find out what's really going on behind the scenes. Number three? Well, there was no number three. So I started a bit of an undercover operation and infiltrated a few local businesses around us at Gladfield. And I discovered a few interesting facts. One of the things I discovered was a term called greenwashing. Now, it's not like people were deliberately trying to go out there and mislead people. But in most cases in these businesses, they were that big that the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. For example, they might have had a fancy heat recovery device that had broken down. They couldn't find spare parts, so they just bypassed it. They might have had a service provider that was getting rid of a waste stream, but all of a sudden the service provider went out of business, so it was just going to landfill. A lot of the time, these businesses were struggling with staff. So what were the managers doing? They were taking the easy option. In most cases, that wasn't carbon neutral. But the key thing on most of these places was they had a big checkbook and they were able to write out a cheque for carbon credits, which give them the right to splash carbon neutral across their business. So I wasn't the only one screwing the planet. So it made me feel a wee bit better. But the key thing is, what were the consumers doing? That's what I wanted to know. So I decided to stake out some supermarkets. And I'd ask the question, as customers were going into the supermarket. I said, look, what's your buying habits? Do you buy local? Do you buy from sustainable businesses? You know, with the right packaging, people are looking after the planet and all the rest of it? And guess what they all said? They all said, yes, we are. That's what we do. But guess what? When I looked in their supermarket trolley when they were going out, guess what they had in it? Everything that was on special. And I even caught one of those clipboard guys filling his trolley up with cheap beer. Dirty bastard. So everyone's screwing the planet, not just me. And that made me feel pretty happy to think that I wasn't alone anymore. So what's the point of the presentation? Well, it's simple. The first thing is, don't jump in and commit to something that you don't understand or don't know anything about. Second, don't beat yourself up by trying to achieve something that's unachievable. Third, don't listen to everything you hear. But most of all, don't feel alone. So, what did we end up doing at Gladfield? Well, we ended up doing what we've always done. What my father told me 30 years ago when I bought my farm. He said, son, make sure you leave this place better than the way you left it. He also said, make sure you marry the right bird who can straighten you out, which I've done. So that's what we've done. We've continued step by step making those improvements, using the tools, the information, the capital, and the expertise that we have at hand, so that we can pass that on to the next generation. Now, some people would call that sustainability, but I just call it plain old business sense. So we stuck to what we call the Gladfield Bible, and it goes like this. Number one, must be on our terms. And this is real a take home for you guys. We've been in the farming industry for 5 generations, and the last thing you want is regulation. Because when you get regulation, you get all these guys with clipboards coming along. And we all know what they're like. So to avoid that, we must do the right thing. Number 2, it must be achievable. If it's not achievable, no one's going to follow you. Must be honest. Number 3. Okay, we all know that only 10% of the population will call bullshit. But let's face it, the other 90% can smell it. Don't underestimate your customers. Be honest. Be authentic. Must be practical. If you overcomplicate it, your staff won't be able to get it. Everything will turn into complete clusterfuck. Trust me. Must provide a measurable benefit. If you can't measure it, no one's going to pay for it. Simple as that. So step by step, what do we do at Gladfield? Well, the first thing we did is we mapped our carbon footprint. We got a third party in, and we looked at where we were actually screwing the planet. And it was really interesting, because there's a lot of things in there we didn't even know we were doing. But it's good to have that map. Really important, first thing you want to do. Then we identified what was achievable. One thing that's not achievable is trying to keep a low carbon footprint and come to the Gold Coast to a beer conference. Things like that. Okay, so look what we can do and what you can't do. Understand the science. That is really key. Now, for example, at Gladfield, and I'll talk about this a wee bit further on, one of the key things that we wanted to do is reduce our carbon footprint in our boilers. Okay? So at the moment, they're burning high quality coal, and we need to change that over to biofuel. And we thought, well, obviously we'll go into barley straw. We've got plenty of that. But one of the key things you need to understand with the science of it is high quality coal burns at a really high temperature. Biofuel doesn't. So it actually puts out more CO2 out the chimney stack per tonne of malt that you're kilning. It also puts out other products like chlorine that you need to deal with. So you need to understand the science when you decide you want to make some changes. Number 4, know our numbers. Now that was another key thing. We want to change our boilers, and they're 8 megawatt boilers, so they're not small things. We want to change that over from coal to biofuel. I have 2 trucks a week coming in dumping coal off. All of a sudden I go over to biofuel, I've got 15. So there's so many more vehicles coming on the road. Now that comes to another thing I'm going to talk about a bit later about ripple effect, and I'll bring this one back up again. Let's move on, number 5. Think of what is around the corner. And like I said right at the start, there's a lot of salespeople there knocking on my door trying to sell me expensive ways and solutions to come up with carbon neutral. We've already identified that it's a utopia, but we still need to do the best we can. So sometimes you might just have to wait a wee bit while. And a good example of this is my lovely wife here. 20 years ago, I went over to Brazil to marry her. Now, she lived only about 10 minutes from a city the size of Melbourne, and they had no telephone, no copper wire. I went back there 5 years later, and all of a sudden it had the most advanced 5G cell phone network system anywhere in the world. They just bypassed the copper wire thing, and they went straight to the technology out there. So sometimes it pays you just to wait. Maybe there's something better around the corner than wasting all your money on something that's not probably going to be that effective. So these are things that you need to be tuning over. 6, what is a true carbon footprint? So at Gladfield we run roasters, where we run our roasted product. And the only thing that we can run that on is gas. At the moment it's LPG. So what we think we're going to do? Cool. We'll put up a wind turbine, put an electrolyser in, and we'll create hydrogen gas. Mate, that will look awesome, especially on our marketing campaign. Isn't it great? Big wind turbines sitting up in the barley fields. But understand, how many tonnes of carbon does it actually take to build that wind turbine, the electrolyser, install it all? So you think from day one, once you got it up and running, bang, you're on zero. You're not. It takes 3 or 4 years just to pay back the amount of carbon it's cost to build that machine. So there's those things that you need to take into account as well. Number 7. This is a favourite of mine. Don't measure it by certificates. Everywhere you go at the moment, everyone's talking about, oh, it needs to be this, needs to be that, certificates. When was the last time you went to a school prize giving? After 3 hours, they're still giving out certificates to every kid in the bloody class in the school. And we're still none the wiser who know who's actually the cleverest at the school. So don't go chasing certificates. It's something that we all need to be aware of. Or look at what the certificates are that people are providing you. 8. Never smoke your own exhaust. That's big at Gladfield. Keep your feet on the ground. Be humble. Like the old man always told me, when everything's going really well, it means one thing. You're about to get a boot up the arse. Number 9, never underestimate young Trev. Now for a while there, young Trev, he's our youngest. We thought the only thing we got right about Trev was his name. But actually, he's quite surprised us in the last couple of years, and he's really brought a lot to the table. But my point here is that everybody in the team has a valuable contribution that they can make. You need to bring along everybody in your team and listen to everybody's ideas and what we create a hybrid ideas. Okay, so everyone's got to be pulling that player in the same direction. Listen to everybody. Number 10, understand the ripple effect. I've even got a fancy slide for this one. So like I was saying before, with our boiler, we want to change over to barley straw, for example, biofuel. All of a sudden we've got 15 trucks coming into Gladfield instead of a couple. Now everybody in Dunsand, where we come from, loves us. They think the sun shines out our backside. But can you imagine all of a sudden we've got these trucks rolling past all our neighbours' place at 2 o'clock in the morning delivering biofuel. All of a sudden they're going to get a bit pissed with us. So there's a ripple effect. So there's always a positive and a negative. A classic example that we can think of, for example, the animal rights group. Okay, they've done some really good work. They've got rid of battery cages. It's great. We've got chickens now that are living in 5-star accommodation. But the reality is half of us can't afford to buy bloody eggs. So there's always a positive and a negative, and we've got to weigh that up. Which way do we want to go? The reality is that every step in the right direction is a good step. But just remember there's going to be those ripple effects. So here we can talk about this later if you've got some questions, but basically what I want to point out here, in making malt, there's 2 parts to it, our carbon footprint. We've got what we do when we're growing and what we do when we're making the malt. And it's around 50-50. So as you can see, most of our carbon footprint is the heating of the kilns and the electricity and the movement of the product around, but obviously the growing of the barley is another area where we've got to work on. Let's flick to the next slide there. Now, a lot of you guys that are into this sort of thing will be well aware of what's up here. Okay, so we've got our scope 1, 2 and 3, indirect and direct areas of inputs. But it's not just about CO2, of course. You've got to remember it's about methane, it's about nitrous oxides, it's about hydrofluorocarbons, things like that in your refrigeration plants, things like that, and sulfur and everything else. So we've got to take all this into account. We can come back to this slide later when you can ask some questions, but this is the sort of thing that your clipboard guys really like getting their teeth into. And when you start to move things back and go a bit further, it's really, really difficult to make sure you're keeping yourself carbon neutral. Like I said before, you come all the way over here to Brisbane, the Gold Coast, to a BrewCon convention, it's not really doing your carbon footprint any good. So you've got to do what you can do in the areas that you can work on. So what did we do? This is what we could do with the technology, the information and knowledge that we have got. So we started out, first things we've been working on for the last 20 years, since Gladfield has been in operation, breeding new varieties. Hands up here, you guys, that are still using Marisota and things like Golden Promise. Okay? Those are the sort of things that really, nowadays, we call screwing the planet. So new varieties that we've developed at Gladfield, such as the Laureate, which is our latest release, uses 30% less nitrogen, 30% less water, and less chemical to grow than any other variety out there. So those are the things that we're trying to target going forward. Now you guys would have all heard the speaker yesterday at the start, going on about trends, people going through and different customers. Things are changing now. People want to know when they're drinking something that you're doing the best you can. They can smell the bullshit. They know the carbon neutral things are utopia, but as long as you're trying to make a difference, that's the key. Soil conservation. This is really key at Gladfield. So 20 years ago, we adopted a technology called the cross-slot drill. It's an amazing piece of equipment. We can put the seed into the ground without any cultivation disturbance. It puts the seed on one side and the fert on the other. It reduces the amount of moisture requirements and it allows us to put up to 3 tonne of carbon back into the soil each year. It's an amazing invention. The biggest issue with that, of course, is that's not officially taken. The carbon that we're putting back in the soil is not officially acknowledged by our clipboard people. We're working on that in New Zealand at the moment with officials, but these are the things that we're doing, and that's a massive game changer for us. Managing the nutrient budgets. Now, I'm just going to read out here some of the things that our growers that have to meet these certifications. So all our growers must have an environmental resource consent to operate, which includes a detailed nutrient budget plan, requiring them to show a 10% reduction in nutrient inputs each year. And this is audited annually and is leading way in new technologies such as nitrogen inhibitors. So when I talked to you before about making sure it's on your own terms, as a brewing industry, you need to take a leaf out of the farming book because it's not on our own terms anymore. Okay? We are now getting audited left, right and centre. We have guys with clipboards coming around all the time. If you do the right thing, it's going to reduce that requirement of people looking over your shoulder all the time. But the agriculture industry in New Zealand is so far ahead of any other industry, it's quite incredible. Now, some of the other things that we do here with the water, and that's one of the things, all our growers at Gladfield are all under irrigation, but they must have water mapping on their farm, which uses accurate water application and transpiration monitoring, combined with software programs that give same-time data for irrigation operations. Again, this is audited by third parties with strict control over efficient water use. That's not just one farmer. That's just not a handful that we just select. That's everyone. That's what the rules are. It's really tight. But that's the sort of things we've done in our business where we've reduced our carbon footprint on the growing side. So what have we done in the maltings? So we're lucky where we are at Gladfield. So let's talk about the steep water. Okay? Steeping is a big user of water. But where we are at Gladfield, we're surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of acres of malting barley on our property. So we've now recycled that water, it all goes into our irrigation systems. The next thing that we're really lucky with at Gladfield is our electricity input. So we're in the South Island of New Zealand, and the majority of the electricity that's generated in New Zealand is hydro. So we've now changed over all our electricity suppliers to hydro suppliers. That was probably one of the easiest things we did. When we did our carbon mapping at the start, that was the first thing we did. It was so easy, it was just a phone call. So like I say, when you go back to your carbon mapping, achieve what's achievable first. That was really easy. The biofuel. Now you can ask me a lot more questions about this at the end. I'm not going into too much detail because I could talk all day on it. It's something that we're pretty passionate about. But we have 8 megawatts of heating required in our kilns. Those of you who have visited Gladfield will understand it's quite a big setup now. We employ over 20 staff. But there's a massive carbon footprint there, and we're only a couple of weeks away from actually switching the switch so that we'll be 100% biofuel in our boilers, and we're really proud of that. Packaging. Well, you don't have to look too far to see the Gladfield packaging anywhere. We're trying to do the best we can there and recycle. But there's a couple of other things that we've done that we haven't told too many people about. We've created a machine, which you can see in the photo down here, which we call the GPC. Now, some people have been to Gladfield and they've seen what we've done, and they'll realise that it's a real innovation. We've actually got a patent on this, on the GPC here in Australia, and what it's allowed us to do is to reduce our pallet sizes by up to 15%. We can get 15% more product into a shipping container. That's achievable. But you can't get a ship that runs on bloody hydrogen gas or solar panels. That's the difference. So do what you can with the information and technology you've got available to you. It's reduced the amount of plastic wrap we put around it. It's reduced so much on our packaging side of it. Gladfield's CO2 emissions per tonne of malt. In 2019, we were 640 kilograms per tonne of malt produced. We've gone to here, 150 kgs by 2023. And we're hugely proud of that. We've got something that we can actually measure. Okay? There's no greenwashing about this. It's achievable. So what does this mean for your brewery? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what's the point? I'll tell you that in a minute. But why does it mean absolutely nothing to you? And this is what nobody will talk to you about. Beer is a social thing. Why do we drink beer? To get away from the humding, the media, and everybody telling us we're all a bunch of heathens because we're all screwing the planet. So what do? We want to drink beer to get away from it. It's a happy place. Then all of a sudden you're drinking a beer and you're sitting down and you look at the label and it says, this beer has been made with sustainable malt from Gladfield. What's the first thing that goes through your head? Shut the fuck up! I want to relax. I want to get away from that. But the thing is, that malt of ours, it's sustainable. It still tastes the same. Nothing's different about it. It still performs as good as it ever did. But we've done the right thing. So what's the point? What's the point for you guys? This is the point. That's my 3 kids. They're all breaking the neck to get into the Gladfield business. In fact, if I don't get home quickly, the buggers will stage a takeover. But that's what it's about. I'm doing what my old man told me to do. Make sure I leave this place better than how I left it for these buggers. And no doubt, in a year or two's time, I'll be kicking them up the arse and tell them to listen to their old man. Step by step, make those improvements with what you've got available to you, with the technology, the knowledge, and the capital you've got. That's it. Thanks.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Have we got any questions? We've got a couple of minutes for some questions. No? I've got one for you. So what's on the agenda next for you? Have you got anything else in your sights in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, it's just a continual improvement. You've just got to work on it step by step the whole time. There's always new options and new ideas that come to you, but again, you've got to go through the process. Think of the ripple effect. There's always someone who's going to try and sell you something that you don't quite understand, so you make it your business to understand it. Understand the science, that's the key to it, and understand the numbers. And all those other pieces that I said there, it's so important in any business. It's just straight business sense. We can all go on all we like about it, but sustainability is a word that everyone's been banding around lately. The reality is we've been doing this since the beginning of time, and this is why we are where we are. We've done very well. We don't want to be beating ourselves up.
So on that, do you recommend, like, if you don't have the skills or the knowledge in-house, is this something like you engage an external contractor, or how do you go around that if it's not sort of inside your business as a knowledge?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And some of the times, like I say, we get all so busy, tied up in our own little personal things that are going on in life that we don't have time to sit down and digest all that information those salespeople were giving us. But the reality is we have to. It's our business, okay? That's what we're doing. We want to be sustainable in business. We've got to understand what's going on. So you've got to take the time to think that yourself. It's all very well getting an expert in, but that expert doesn't generally know exactly how your particular business or brewery is operating. They don't know that you've got a certain energy supply that's got to come through here, or whatever, you've got power lines that come through your neighbour's place and all that. They don't know all that stuff. So they can give you an idea, but they don't know all the intricacies of your business. So you really do need to spend the time and study it. Ask lots of questions. I always remember a lot of people ask me, I started making malt from nothing. I was just a farmer. I left school, I was a shearer actually. And people said to me, how the hell did you learn how to make the world's best pure malt? Which I'm really proud of. And you know what I said to them? I said, it's really simple. When you're a young fella and you go to a nightclub or a hotel and you see some bird on the other side that you really like, I'll guarantee you'll find out a name and everything about it by the end of the night. Because you want to. If you don't want to learn it, you won't. It's like school. When you're at school, how many bloody kids do you know that do really, really well at certain subjects and not at others? What's the difference? Because they're not bloody interested. If you're really interested in making a difference, you'll make the time to learn. As simple as that.
Sorry, it's not so much a question as a comment. Being a scientist myself, I would say I completely applaud attempting to understand that science internally, because so many people just take things absolutely at face value. They want a simple one-liner statement, that's all, or just get a consultant who probably knows even less than you do on it, and in fact brings up other people like suppliers to ask them the answers, because they've got no clue. So yeah, we come across a lot of that in supplying to the industry. So I would say, yeah, take the time to understand what you're being told. I think is a really good message.
And it is good advice, because I think we're under a lot of pressure to do the right things in our businesses, and sometimes when someone comes along with the silver bullets and it sounds good, you want to believe that it is going to make the difference. So I think that's very good advice on all fronts, actually, not just sustainability. So thank you ever so much for talking to us today. Round of applause for Doug. Thank you.